What is up, everybody? Super excited to be here with Ben Jorgensen, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Constellation Network and DAG. And obviously we are Genfinity. We are down here at Consensus 2023. I always like to start these discussions out with kind of a little bit of a background and introduction about who we're talking to today. So Ben, if you could give us a background of yourself and maybe a little bit of an introduction into the Constellation Network, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, my name is Ben Jorgensen, as Ryan already noticed. I'm the CEO of Constellation, and a little bit on my background. I've been covered in NASDAQ, Forbes, Fortune. I have a history of building companies. I've been a part of the Constellation story for about 5 years, since the very beginning. Actually started out as an advisor. Kind of worked my way to the top, if you will. And yeah, a little on my background. I come from Indiana. So those kind of Midwest roots have been ingrained in building good companies, coming with integrity, which is kind of how we build our business. Yeah.
100%. And I mean, I get so many questions all the time, and a lot of people, we do a lot of cross-chain spaces that always want me to get you guys up there. You guys have been there before, which I certainly thank you for supporting.
Sure.
For people that haven't listened to some of the spaces that we've done before that have learned about what Constellation is doing, can you talk about the importance of the layer zero aspects of the Constellation Network and what that represents for interoperability in the Web3 space?
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that Constellation is kind of defining the space as a layer zero, which is a feeless network where validation occurs, or consensus occurs both on the state and local level amongst the applications, as well as the global L0, as we call it. So we divide up consensus processes for speed and scalability. This kind of positions us very uniquely in the space, in that when people come to Constellation, they're actually building their own layer one network on top of ourselves. On top of the hypergraph, or our global layer zero. And I think that's one of the main differentiators here, is that each application or company can actually design their own currency framework, tokenomics, validator nodes that sit on top of our network without having to build a network from scratch. And I think that's one of the really kind of big highlights here, that when you look at Ethereum, you come to an ecosystem without developer flexibility. So Constellation's focus is really around developer flexibility that allows us to not migrate Web 2 companies into Web 3, but give Web 3 tooling to Web 2 properties or entities in the digital space.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, a lot of the times in this space, I'm going to go off the cuff a little bit here. You see projects or ecosystems just trying to go full Web 3.
Yeah.
And there's been hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of infrastructure built out into Web 2. So really kind of bridging the gap and creating that Web 2.5 type ecosystem in a way that makes sense to Web 2, that doesn't have to reinvent it, but injects in value in ways that make sense with Web 3 is totally amazing. I mean,
yeah, it's a kind of a nuanced idea, because you think of Web 3 as its own industry, right? It's got its own services, it's got its own clients, it's got its own economics and business benefits. But what about the Web 2 world that actually can use immutability at the core of every application that they're building? That hasn't really been thought of and actually been explored. And that's largely what we're doing today. And I'm pretty happy to say that we've been, a lot of our roadmap has been guided by the federal government. So we work very closely with the United States Air Force in kind of designing this flexible tool base or developer kit that meets such a massive use case as working with the DoD, which has so many different agencies and so many different ways of using blockchain technology.
100%. I mean, and I think that you guys are probably definitively like the layer one or layer zero. You guys are a layer zero, obviously, that with the most kind of DoD or Department of Defense contracts.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how important it is, maybe from a government standpoint, maybe from your ethos and the Constellation Network's ethos, ESG and sustainability is? You guys put out a tweet probably 4 or 5 days ago. The entire Hypergraph Transfer Protocol network essentially operates with 4.8 kilowatts, which is 25,000 times lower than the energy footprint that Bitcoin represents. How important is sustainability for the network and for layer ones building on top of the layer zero that you guys are representing?
Yeah, great question. So roughly in a isolated test transaction, we did about 80,000 transactions a second, which would equate to, if we ran that for an entire day, that would bake down to like 4 light bulbs or something, running an entire day. That's pretty amazing considering the volume of transactions. Sustainability is kind of the core of how we brought about a building Constellation. And interesting enough, a lot of the federal government has a priority to only work with technologies that are sustainable. So that actually has to be a line item, and one of the things that we do and build with the federal, as well as working with their legacy systems. So it's quite a tough feat to work with the federal government and then introduce innovative technologies, be sustainable, and then also work with legacy systems that they've been working with over the years.
100%. And I think recently also you guys announced a Web3 launch kit in coordination or combination with Ashbury Legal. So
yeah.
Talking about the developer onboarding into the Constellation ecosystem and the ability for these layer 1 or projects to build on top of the layer 0 aspects of Constellation, would love for you to talk about the SDK. So
yeah.
How plug and play is that aspect for developers to come and onboard into Constellation, build what they want to build in a way that makes sense for them, but utilize the utility of the Constellation network?
Yeah, I don't like to compare ourselves to other chains, but I think it's important as we navigate this ecosystem. Blockchain is it's not a competitive sport, it's a collaborative sport. An ecosystem. And so actually comparing ourselves is actually about how we all can work together. Most of what you're saying on your cross-chain and interoperability components. So Constellation is kind of similar to Cosmos, and we're trying to make it easier for developers to navigate than Cosmos, while also providing more flexibility. Once again, our mindset has been, how do we allow developers the flexibility to build the application versus forcing them into a framework or box that they have to look into. So our whole thinking is more in line with how developers build in the digital Web 2 front. So our first developer SDK is the Euclid SDK. It's called the Euclid SDK. And really this is kind of allowing people to build a currency framework or their own network with a currency incentive attached to it. Really, this is just like the starting point, and we're going to be doing a fast follow-on where people will be able to amend that SDK and be able to cryptographically secure really any data type, IoT data, sensor data, and put that on a mutable ledger and be able to call that and show with transparency that the data was what they collected. So this is really kind of our first foray into the space and getting developer tools with our developer SDK. And it's exciting for us, right? We want to start to see people build on us. To your point on the Web3 launch kit, what we kind of envisioned is that going through multiple token launches, we saw a lot of hurdles on the regulatory front. I think we all are talking about the regulatory environment, what's coming, how do you launch a token? That seems to be the primary use case on blockchain technology. And so the Web3 launch kit was really a way to help entrepreneurs create a business. Really a business. So as they're thinking about their application, they're also thinking about how to build their business. Well, how do you do that in a regulatory compliant way? How do you create compliance around raising capital against currency or equity? And we started out with the US. The US it kind of leads the space in regulation. And so it's probably the most strict in many ways. And so we wanted to start there and really make it easy for not only developers to come in, but entrepreneurs to build their business as well.
100%. I think the last thing that I always like to lead out with is understanding where we might potentially be in this space. So from the Constellation standpoint, from your standpoint, what are some of the most exciting milestones or achievements that you guys achieved in 2022? And what are you most anticipating for the Constellation Network moving into 2023? Whether it be the DoD aspects, whether it be the SDK going on to make easier onboarding for developers. So maybe a quick recap of some of the biggest milestones you guys had in 2022 and what you're looking forward to moving throughout this year.
2022 was actually a really amazing year for Constellation. And a lot of what we did, it was first create our first piece of hardware that validates foot traffic data. So the hardware sticks above your doorway, measures foot traffic, and people receive cryptocurrency as a reward or incentive for collecting that data.
By the way, I was trying to get into the door miner aspects and they sell out like immediately.
Yeah.
So not financial advice to anybody listening, but like every time I see them launch, and we're always so busy in this space, I see that they just go like immediately almost. And there's so many use cases for that. Please continue. I'm sorry.
No. It's an awesome piece of technology. So we acquired a company called Door Technologies in 2021, and we decided to basically Web3ify this. And what that means is, just like I said, we call it the Door Traffic Miner. We sold this for about $5,000, where people would buy this device and stick it above a doorway, measure foot traffic, and receive cryptocurrency as an incentive. And then we can add bounties on that based on location information. To me, this is pretty exciting because what we were able to use is that we were actually able to use NFTs here as a receipt or voucher for somebody's purchase, and a registration of that the product, which I thought was a real tangible use of Web3 technology beyond just the digital art space, but actually looking at how do you deal with supply chain issues and hardware distribution. You can actually do that through an NFT. Another notable achievement was releasing our Mainnet 2.0, which was our upgrade to our network, which really allowed us to start building those developer tools so that we could open up the network for developers to come into our ecosystem. That happened in Q3 of 2022. And then our work with the Department of Defense. What was awesome about our work with the Department of Defense is we actually built a prototype with one of their end customers in the private sector. So we actually had to work with the Department of Defense, work with their systems, and then work with their clients. And this really presented a kind of soup to nuts experience or complete life cycle of our technology in working with the federal government as well as potential partners that would use this technology outside the government.
What are you excited about this year and moving forward for the Constellation Network? Whether it be 2023 or the space in general, or how you consider this kind of meshing of kind of mass adoption kind of coming to fruition, and what Constellation is going to be leveraged for moving forward.
Yeah, I'm really excited to start showing what we call metagraphs. These are the networks, the layer one networks that people can build on Constellation, and showing how you can actually build real business and program business logic into the hypergraph, into basically tokenizing data. I think this is a really fascinating achievement that we're really starting with around the door business. And we're going to be showing a metagraph example through the lens of the Door Traffic Miner, a comprehensive token ecosystem around data validation. To me, that's a huge home run. We're also doing a lot more with the Department of Defense, which I can't really share right now, but there's some incredible achievements that are coming on board over the next couple of months that I'm very, very amped up for. I think this is the year that we're starting to see things that really matter. I love it. Like, everything got fat. Everything got really fat in 2021, 2022. Kind of remind me of 2017 to 2018. So I like seeing real projects come out of this. I like seeing the hybrid of the old world and the new world. Like, that to me is kind of the vision that we set out, and we're starting to see those conversations. ChatGPT, seeing where does this data come from? Who validates it? What systems are integrated? We're all starting to question AI and where that data, well, Constellation's kind of at the core of that right now. So I'm already working with some other major chains that are also starting to lead kind of that conversation on data security, privacy, transparency. And I think that's going to be what ushers in 2024.
Well, I mean, such a pleasure to be able to sit down and have a talk with you. I know how busy everybody is in this space, Ben. And again, we had Ben Jorgensen, obviously co-founder and CEO of Constellation Network, talking everything hypergraph, talking everything within the DoD relationships, Internet of Things, talking data, talking the door traffic miners, the SDK aspects for easier development, onboarding into the space. Really looking forward to seeing what you guys do. Yeah. Hopefully we can nail you guys down into one of these, a couple of these cross-chain spaces this year, and appreciate your time, dude.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time too. Great questions,
All right,
man. Good to meet you.